Good morning, everyone. Let's start with the prayer. Christ our God, you are the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. You fulfilled the Father's entire plan for salvation. Fill our hearts with joy and gladness, always, now, and forever, to the ages of ages. Amen. So it seems like most of you are people who know what Theology 101 is, but I'll describe it just briefly. This is a venue for some dialogue about our faith. And I say dialogue because it's not just supposed to be me lecturing all of you. Now that said, I will do some talking about the Holy Plan pilgrimage as has been asked. But at the beginning of each Theology 101, I'd rather start first with questions, just as we've always had, and then after the questions, I'll do a little bit of the Holy Land trip. And the questions oftentimes can range from the Gospel, from the Epistle, from the homily, but your questions can be anything under the sun. Okay? So, having said that, I invite you, do any of you have any questions, anything you'd like to understand or talk about? Yes, Patrick.
How long was your trip to the Holy Land?
That's not quite a dialogue. I was there for almost 2 weeks.
Oh,
yeah. So this will go on and on and on over the course of weeks. Anything else?
So, when Father Timothy was here, one of the things that came up was the parable of the Samaritan. And one of the things that we talked about was being able to look at that not so much in us being the person of the Samaritan, but us being the one who's beaten up and robbed and everything else. And I was wondering if there was another way to look at that as not being someone who's looked up and robbed everything and wanting someone else to come by us. But is that kind of like a metaphor for human condition? Like we're the fallen, this is our fallen state, and Christ is the one who's coming for us.
So you're saying, so the question is about something that Father Timothy brought up at the retreat, which was the parable of the Good Samaritan, and there was a particular talk that he had listened to and repeated from. And in that talk, it was focusing, rather than on us being the Good Samaritan helping people, on us as the one who is beat up and wounded on the side of the road. And you were asking about that in a broader sense?
In a broader sense, is that kind of mirroring, can I see the whole salvation story in that story?
Yes. Yeah, you can see all of our salvation story within that. So, and yes, it would also be understood as that Christ is coming to heal all of humanity. Yeah. Now, for our particular spiritual lives, that may not be super helpful other than to know the nature of Christ. But that's where Father Timothy was connecting it very specifically with, I am the one on the side of the road. Because then everything becomes very real. Because it's easier for us to think of ourselves in the role of Good Samaritan. Because that's more of like, well, do I do the good thing or do I not do the good thing? To think of ourselves as the one on the side of the road who's bloodied and dying. That's harder for us because that implies automatically I can't really identify with being bloodied and dying unless I see the ways in which my soul is bloodied and dying. So, but all of humanity, yeah, that's a good question. All of humanity, that's the condition of humankind, and therefore Christ came to save each and every person. Any other questions? homily sink in? Okay. So I will begin a many-week journey into the Holy Land. And I wanted to give a little bit of a background about the region and understand that there's never enough that could be said. There's so much history there, so much culture, so much importance to our faith. So I'll just touch on a few things, and then the order of our journey together through the Holy Land will be a journey through Christ's life. So it won't be that I went here, and then we drove up to there, and then we drove over here and saw this thing down here. It will instead be that Christ was born in Bethlehem. So what's there? The Church of the Nativity. We'll talk about that. So it'll be more of a journey through Christ's life than particularly a journey through the pilgrimage that I went on. But it will incorporate photos from that trip, as well as better pictures online. So we can't really understand the Holy Land unless we understand a little bit about the geography of the Holy Land. This is a very helpful map that we can just keep looking at and pointing back to. What you can see in this map is that this area, all of this area here, is what is modern-day Israel. So this map actually combines the modern places like Tel Aviv and the state of Israel, along with some of the historical places like Jacob's Well, and some of these ancient cities like Capernaum, which is no longer a town anymore. This map is very colorful, but it also, it's an elevation map. So green means lower elevation, sea level, and then getting up to red gives you a sense of higher elevations. So you can kind of see how this is what goes right down the center is the Jordan River, which has the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And on both sides are mountains. And these mountains are thousands of feet tall. Like Jerusalem itself is, I believe, at about 2,500 foot elevation. But this map, because it's so green, it doesn't really give you a sense of what it's really like there. So instead, that's what it looks like. Yeah, not very green at all. Okay, it's a desert. It's a desert. And as a desert, this is something very central to understanding everything about the Bible, because when you're dealing with the desert, and all of the scriptures deals with the desert. When you're dealing with the desert, what's one of the most important things? Water. Water, exactly. So how things are centered around water, where people go for water. Finding a spring is incredibly important. That means that you can live there and survive there. Whereas here in Oregon, you can live and survive anywhere. So it's a desert and very low precipitation. Definition of a desert is less than 10 inches a year of rain. Compare that again to Oregon. And less than 10 inches, that means some of these places here are getting less than 1 inch of rain a year. But we've also probably all heard from your history classes about the Fertile Crescent. So I didn't have a map of that. This is the beginning, almost the beginning of the Fertile Crescent. It goes down to the Nile River, which is right off of this map and right off of that map. And it's a crescent shape going from the Nile River up through the Holy Land, through Lebanon, up through northern Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and going down through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. And it's called the Fertile Crescent not because it's green, but because there is more green. So there are many places in Israel where you go and you see lushness around, but it's still in the midst of a desert. And so for those who are living in the desert, these were the places to go. And these were the places that were first cultivated. These were the places that people started growing crops. And so in the Holy Land, the Holy Land is centered around the Jordan River. You can really see that in both of these images. And that helps us to understand how important the Jordan River is spiritually as well as practically speaking in terms of water. So the water for Israel, other than the springs that there are around in some rivers, one of the biggest sources of water for Israel to this day is the Sea of Galilee. It's a biblical sea that still exists out there on the satellite image. And the Jordan River begins above that. You see up here these tall mountains of Lebanon, where the cedars of Lebanon are, or were for the most part. And there are a couple of tributaries that lead into the Jordan River. And that's where the Jordan River begins. This is, again, the Sea of Galilee, which is an immense sea. If any of you have been to Lake Tahoe in California, so I can relate it to that. I've never been to Great Lakes, so I can relate it to that. But it's miles across, probably 10 miles across and 20 or 30 miles long. So it's a very large, it's amazing. And then coming out of that is the Jordan River. At the top of the Jordan River here is where John the Baptist was baptizing, and then down here where he baptized Christ, and then it goes into the Dead Sea. All of this is below sea level. And how unusual is something below sea level? There are very few places in the world that are below sea level. It has everything to do with the tectonic plates and how they shift. So the Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. And then the Dead Sea is, I want to say around 1,800 feet below sea level. I don't remember the exact. So all of this is below sea level. So everything flows in there and it doesn't flow out. And that's why the Dead Sea is the Dead Sea, because water goes in, it evaporates, and then minerals are left. So it's highly nothing. So that's a picture in Sebastia, but again, giving you the idea that this is fertile because all of those are all olive trees. There's lots of growth that's happening there, but it's not green, lush kind of thing. And then here's another image. This is outside of Jericho. This is what you see a lot, is you see deadness and then aliveness, because down in the valleys are where the rivers even flowing underwater are flowing. But then up on the hills, you see all of those are all caves. Jericho is right there. So remember in the story of the Good Samaritan, he was going down to Jericho. So that is from about 2,500 foot elevation down to close to 1,000 feet below sea level. So it's quite a precipitous downhill in a very short distance. Any questions so far? So in recent times, I'm sure that you've read about Israel in the news. Israel is an amalgam that has been created since its beginning between areas called the West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, and what would be considered Israel proper. And so in recent history, this is, we could say thank you to the Brits for this. They're the ones who carved up what was under the British mandate. And this was after World War after World War II, actually. And so this was the original map of how they were going to split up these regions. And they were going to have a new Jewish state here, and then a Palestinian state here, and here. And the Arabs that were living there and near there didn't want that, and so they started a war, which is called the Arab-Israeli War in 1948. And the result of that was the beginning of the new Jewish state, which is, this is Israel, and then this here is Jordanian owned. This is the country of Jordan, what is today known as the West Bank, including the old city of Jerusalem. And then Gaza over here was occupied by Egypt, which is the country here. So the Arabs in the region kept on plotting against Israel, and so they eventually launched a war in 1967, which is called the 6 Days War. In Arabic, it's called the setback, because what happened was they went in, they got repelled, and Israel took over even more land. So Israel took over all of the Sinai Peninsula, this is the Red Sea right here. So all of the Sinai Peninsula, including Gaza. Israel took over all of the West Bank, all of Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights here from Syria. Now you notice something here. What was the border? The Jordan River was the border. Okay? So this water source right here, shared by Lebanon and Syria, that was one of the things that Israel took completely. So all sides of the Sea of Galilee are now in Israel. So today there are 9.4 million people in Israel and the West Bank. I'll usually say Israel and the West Bank, though the West Bank is part of the nation of Israel. It is treated separately in some ways. Some regions are under Palestinian authority control. Gaza was a part of Palestinian control, and then Gaza was, the people there basically formed a revolution, and they now control Gaza themselves. It's not a part of Israel. Or at least Israel doesn't set foot in Gaza. So of the population, 9.4 million, 74% are Jewish, 18% are Muslim, 2% are Christian, and a little under 2% are Druze, and then another 2 or 3% are something else or not defined. And I'll talk about Druze later. That's a separate religious group. So with only 2% of Christians, how many towns in Israel are Christian? One. There's one town that is only a Christian town. All of the other Christians are scattered about in areas where there's either usually a solid Muslim majority, and sometimes in areas where there's a Jewish majority. So the Christians are a very, very small minority all through the Holy Land, everywhere. That one town that I mentioned is called Taipei. And you can make it to the Holy Land, go there and support them as much as you can. They make a good beer, too.
Larger percentage of Christians because of Christians, and then they were
So there used to be a larger percentage of Christians. In relation to the Jewish number, yes. In relation to the Muslim number, no. Christians have been a small minority since the rise of Islam, since the Persian invasion in the 7th century. So,
my understanding is that since World War II, there has been an ongoing effort to kind of push out a lot of Palestinian Christians. So
so those numbers are dwindling, definitely. But it's such a small number anyway. In the city of Jerusalem, in the old city of Jerusalem, there are 4 quarters of the city, and these have been called these quarters since medieval times: Jewish quarter, Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, and Armenian quarter. And in there, the percentages are higher of Christians. There are 27,000 Muslims and 6,000 Christians, just 800 Armenians and 3,000 Jews. There weren't a lot of Jewish people in the old city because that was taken over by, that was still under Jordanian control. It's only been since the 1967 war that Jewish people could be living in the old city. And, Israeli citizens. There were still a small number of Jewish people. Any other questions? Again, a very short description of the demographic and political situation there. So the West Bank, the Palestinians there are Arabs, mostly Muslim again, but there are Arabs all throughout Israel, but the highest number are within the West Bank. And Jewish people are not permitted to live in the West Bank, except the thing that you may have all heard of called settlements. So a settlement is an encroachment of, I'll be blunt here, an encroachment of Jewish zealots who are trying to take back land that was kept to the Palestinians. And so these settlements have continued to pop up. There are tens of thousands, and actually I think hundreds of thousands, of Israeli settlers in different areas within the West Bank. And when we traveled through there, you would be able to tell because everything around is dry, the buildings are all shabby, and then you see like this really nice new looking building, green grasses, everything nice, and then barbed wire all around it. So these are the settlements that exist. And some of the settlements, like around Jerusalem, are huge, high-rise skyscrapers, like cities, and others of them are just little outposts. And that, of course, is a continuous thorn in the side for the Palestinians. So Palestinians do not have Israeli citizenship. Therefore, it's very difficult for them to travel internationally. They cannot fly out of Tel Aviv airports. They have to fly in and out of Amman, Jordan, and cross the Jordan River into Jordan to fly anywhere. So they're kind of nationless people as a result of all of this. So the conflicts that you've heard about in Israel, in Palestine, in the West Bank, will not go away anytime because the Jewish people want a Jewish state, and the Palestinians want the land that they were on. So there's no solution to that.
I'm just curious how many people in your audience have also been to Israel?
There we go. So question to the audience, how many of you have been to Israel? There we go. So you did too, okay. Any additional places you went that I don't mention or experiences you had in those places, please feel free to offer those as well. So then I'll ask you on the spot, what was your experience of that? Did you go into the West Bank?
Oh, I'm on the spot.
Yeah.
Yes. And we stayed in the Golan Heights at a kibbutz on the Sea of Galilee.
Okay.
And I got to pose with a UN soldier, traded guns, and I tell you, the picture, believe it or not, 40 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, so this was right after, not too long after the war, 40 years ago.
40 years ago, I'm thinking 1980.
Oh, okay. About 20 years after the war. So Golan Heights was still very contentious.
And there were still Russian tanks in the Sinai Desert.
Yeah.
They drove in Egypt. I don't know if they still are there.
Yeah. You mean like destroyed tanks?
Destroyed tanks that are littering the desert.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Golan Heights there are old Syrian military bases that are just decaying. Other questions? Yeah, I can't point it out very easily.
It's all down.
It's down pretty far. Yeah. So that's what I didn't show you the new map. So I don't have a new map. This right here, Egypt negotiated with Israel to get this back. So this is now a part of Egypt again. Yeah, and that was I think in the 80s, maybe 70s. So that was a big negotiation that went on. Egypt actually shut down the Suez Canal for a while, which of course international commerce didn't like that, so they needed to get this worked out. Oh, yeah, I didn't say her question. I should have. She just asked, where is St. Catherine? It's down here somewhere, or maybe over here. So, not in Egypt, not in Israel, in Egypt. Questions? So I was talking a little bit about the West Bank. In the West Bank, there are 3 regions, A, B, and C. And of those regions, that tells how much Israeli control there is. I'm trying to remember which direction is. I think A is the most, Israel has the most control, and C, Palestinians have the most control. But most all of the West Bank is A, and much of it is B, which means Israel still controls it. There are small regions within this, and I had another map. You just see these little splotches here, these little dots. Those are the sea areas that are completely under Palestinian Authority control. Palestinian Authority does have its own police. And those regions, Israeli citizens are not allowed even to go into those regions. But most of it, like especially all along the Jordan River here, is completely Israeli control. Like, no Palestinians can even live there, the military bases. So even though it's in the West Bank, don't imagine that therefore it's an area that the people can just go and live there. Likewise with Golan Heights, because so you can kind of tell here that it's a lighter color, so it's higher elevation. This is why this was a strategic area for Israel, because the Syrians could easily see into and attack places within Israel. In Golan Heights, you can't just go and move and live there. I live in Golan Heights, not that you want to necessarily. But in that region is where the Druze population predominantly is anywhere in Israel. So Druze are a group that is a syncretistic religion, meaning they've taken things from different places. Their roots were in Islam, however, they do not consider themselves Muslim. And they've taken some things from Christianity, from Zoroastrianism in Persia, from Judaism, a number of different things. And the Druze are their religion is secretive, and they're a closed community. You can't convert to becoming a Druze. And Druze properly only marry other Druze. If they marry outside of the Druze community, they're shunned from the Druze community. And Druze live in Golan Heights, and in southern Lebanon is the largest group, and also a little bit in Syria as well. So when we travel that far north, then the Druze are very skilled farmers. They grew the best cherries. So that's a small segment called Druze, but again, kind of their own little area.
Did you spell that word?
Oh yeah, D-R-U-Z-E. Druze. Yeah, if you want to have a little interesting look into another religion. They believe in reincarnation, they have a lot of different things that are just kind of unique to them. So they call themselves, their religion, the monotheists. That's what they actually call themselves. So, I think that's what the word Druze means. Yeah. Yes.
I was just saying, I'll throw out a really quick personal experience I had.
Please go.
Good friend's mom, he's Palestinian, his family's Palestinian from Jordan, so a lot of Palestinian people in Jordan. Because Jordan's primarily Muslim, his family's Muslim. His mom's family is Protestant, his dad's family is Orthodox, and they're both Palestinian. But his mom and dad turned back to Islam before they met each other as young people, and are completely ostracized. So Mom and I talk a lot, but the families, they seem to cut them off.
Yeah, and that's very true in this region for all of the religions.
The thing to add to that is, Rami, his dad's family came over when his dad was young and left because it was too hard to feed Islam in America. But they come back just for financial reasons. That's the thing that they struggle with, is that the kids in America lose their faith here. And I guess what I'm just saying is, it was interesting to talk to Ronnie, and I talked to his dad. They had their family over for dinner, they had us over, whatever, sat on the floor like we're supposed to in our house. We all ate around the same table. But the struggles in America is the youth lose their identity. I mean,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that experience. And that also you brought up a good point, which was naturally when there's an invading army, like when Israel went into the West Bank, many people fled. And I heard this a lot in Jerusalem, in the old city, but also all around Jerusalem and other places. The people left thinking they would come back. So there are many homes that were left abandoned because the people were just trying to get out of there quickly and they thought that they would come back. And those homes, many of those have then been taken over subsequently by Jewish families, and so there's a lot of bitterness and animosity. Just outside of the old city, across the Kidron Valley in East Jerusalem, was almost all Arab. And now when you look out from the old city on this hill, you see these houses that have massive Israeli flags and this kind of thing. And then when I was in the old city, I saw this van go by that had like fine mesh, like cyclone fence on the windows all around. I said, that's like for a riot or something. And our guide said, oh no, they're a Jewish family that lives over there. Because they're basically like squatters coming in, and the people who have been there for generations, they're throwing rocks at their cars and that kind of thing. So, very contentious. Very contentious.
Yeah, I'm glad, like Rami talking to his dad, there's still a lot of anger because again, their family broke the shower.
Yeah.
A lot of anger.
Yes, Jason.
I think that's something that's worth considering. Like, after that initial 1940s war, a lot of them did go to Jordan, but then they tried to overthrow the Jordanian government, the Palestinians, and so many of them got kicked out of
Oh yeah, that's another worthwhile thing to know. So throughout the Middle East, like anywhere in the world, but in the Middle East especially, there are people taking over lands. Those people go somewhere else. They try to do something else. And so, especially with the Palestinians, there, like in Lebanon, there are decades-old refugee camps that have become cities where the people have lived. And the Lebanese, probably in part because of the experience in Jordan, the Lebanese are not keen on making them citizens and giving them all of the status of a citizen because of fears that they would take over. So they have this, again, in Lebanon, you think, oh, well, the Jewish people the Israelis are treating the Palestinians so badly. It goes all around. So I lived in Lebanon for a while, and in Lebanon it was the exact same thing. The Palestinians were like, when they live over in those refugee camps, they've lived there generationally. It's not like we think of a refugee camp like some tents you stay in for a few months. So a very difficult situation there.
I'll just say, my first degree was in history, and so I understand with the rise of Islam in the 7th century, 1622, the Islamic idea of the Holy War caused them to conquer this whole region, which was predominantly Christian and Jewish. And they conquered all of North Africa, and then they conquered Spain. And then they fought 700 years in a war against the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah.
They finally took Constantinople in 1453. And then subsequent to that, they took their base from Constantinople and they invaded Central Europe. So at about the time of the Reformation in Western Europe, the Muslims were trying to conquer Austria. And Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, he was Catholic, and he said, all right, let's put aside our Catholic Protestant differences and push them out of Central Europe. So kind of the big picture here is Islam is probably the greatest military threat to the Western world for about 1,000 years until the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and I won't be getting too much in the history between after Christ up until now. I just wanted to get into the contemporary history of what it's like today. But yes, there's so much history in all of this, and history that's interwoven with our church.
About 5 minutes.
So we have 5 minutes. Any other questions? I didn't particularly have anywhere further to go today, so if you have more questions, we can
I'll
answer.
add one more thought,
Yeah.
that's interesting you brought up. Is the Palestinians are in Jordan. They're living with the
Jordanians, yeah.
Jordanians. They live together really well. But his
Now they
Christians are second-class citizens, and any Egyptian that comes up in Jordan is going to do the worst work, the worst thing. Nothing wrong to say, like, his whole attitude, their attitude towards any Egyptians coming up is, whatever they get is what they deserve, however we need. So that you're right, it's not like, it's just one sided. There's such a dynamic over it.
And then each of these countries that are Muslim are majority Shiite or majority Sunni, and those are two different sects that do not get along. And so that's another aspect of all of this, is whether, like, the Palestinians are mostly Sunni, but there are some Shiite. But then some of the militant groups aligned with Syria are Shiite and not Sunni. So there's so many different nuances of complexity with this. Yes?
I get the sound of words confused easily. So Druze has nothing to do with Druids.
Nothing to do with Druid, yeah. So that's a fine question. And that's why the spelling was a good question. Druid is D-R-U-I-D. Druze is D-R-U-Z-E. So yeah, entirely different.
Where were you able to go on tourists, like this songs?
Everywhere. Other than Gaza. No one wants to go to Gaza right now. So Gaza is like its own little rebellion country. But it was, even before that, when it was still under Israeli control, it was the slums of the slums. It's such a tiny little strip of land with so many people, so much squalor. It's not a very good place anyway, but also there's a lot of militancy there. And so it wouldn't be a good place for a Westerner to visit or a Jewish person. I was nice there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll show you photographs of me in my shorts. You'll see, actually, I don't know if I have it, but I wore what's traditional for a Greek Orthodox priest is what's called a kalimafi. It looks like a stove top. So I wore that as well. Yes.
I was just going to ask. I noticed that on the map that the largest thing, the largest distance measure is 30 miles.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so if I wanted to have a long day's drive, I could start in Jerusalem, go to Tel Aviv, up to Haifa, over to the Sea of Galilee, down the Jordan River, to Jericho, and back to Jerusalem in about 7 hours. So, and this is on their roads. So some of their roads are highways, and some of their roads are not very fast. The distance, if you look here, you can get a really strong sense. We had a situation where one of our kids had a dehydration. We were down in Jericho, it was over 100 degrees. They said, go to the hospitals in Jerusalem, they're better. We drove from Jericho up to Jerusalem half an hour, went to the hospital, drove half an hour back, and we were back in no time. So, very small area there. Very small. Yeah, even with the more basic roads, it's, just a couple hours.
Yeah, question. My mind is.
And this will be the last question, just because Sunday school. But yeah.
Okay, my mind's settling into the landscape and the harshness and the not very green world. How much are the islands of Greece like that? How much are the territories of Greece?
Yeah, so
severe.
Technically, this would be called desert. This would be called Mediterranean climate. Now, Mediterranean climate, for the most part, oftentimes is desert as far as the amount of rain. But this would be very similar to a lot of places in Greece, which are also Mediterranean. Because unless you get into northern Greece, where there's a lot more rainfall, it's very similar to this. So, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about this.
And I have one other announcement as well.
Okay, about the classes in general and how this all fits in. When you came back, you said it's so tense over here. Like in Jerusalem, how this is going to be important to understand moving forward what the situation is in the Holy Christians, all the groups.
Yeah, and we'll keep on touching upon that. It's very, very tense over there. Very small group of Christians. These sites that have one elderly monk who is literally holding down the site from people coming in and squatting and taking it. It's just a very difficult situation. We need lots of our prayer, so I will be talking about that as we go through and see these sites and some of these nuns and monks that are holding down these sites on our behalf. So Jerusalem, just so that you're aware, Jerusalem is central to the second coming of Christ. So Jerusalem is not over by any means. We don't know what all of that is going to look like, but it's a place that we as Christians should always hold as holy. It's not just a thing of the past. Totally unrelated, we had a parishioner who was blessed to go see the Myrrh streaming Iberon icon from Hawaii, which was way out in eastern Washington. If you don't know about this icon, which I've been blessed to be in the presence of a number of times, this icon was in someone's home, a pious family in Hawaii, and it's presence in Hebrew icon, right? Yeah, it's a print. It's a print. It's not a hand-painted icon or anything. This icon started streaming myrrh and has been streaming myrrh now for about at least a dozen years. And please pray that by God's grace this will come to our parish someday, because I'll be trying to work on that. But the parishioner was nice enough to cut up cotton swabs and have them myrrh. So you can take this home, you can anoint yourself with it. You don't even need to open the bag to smell it, but obviously you would open it up to anoint yourself with this. So this is a great blessing for all of you. You can each come up and receive one of these and take it home. Use it in time of need when you have a special concern. Say a prayer to Panagia, and may it be blessed. So, like anything, like icons, it would be something that we burn or we bury in the ground somewhere people won't walk. Yeah, when you finish with the okay. May it bless you all. Remember, the myrrh comes from nothing. From nothing. I mean, like, that's the miracle of it. Like, it's not from something somewhere. It's just literally God sends it out through you. If you have skepticism, come and see me. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
If your children are 6th grade